විශේෂයෙන් කැඳවන්න කල්පනා කරේ ඉදිරියේදී ගුවන් සමාගමේ අනාගත තීරණය කිරීම සම්බන්ධයෙන් කවර ක්‍රියාමාර්ග ගන්නවද කියන කාරණය පිළිබඳව සාකච්ඡා කරන්න. We have simultaneous translation service. You could use Secretary, you may introduce your team.
I am KDS1 General Secretary of the Ministry of Port Shipping and Aviation. Others will introduce themselves.
Yeah, I'm Ashok Patriki, Chairman of Srilanka Airlines.
Richard Nuttall, CEO of Lankan Airlines.
I am Sandhya Pushpanani, Chief Financial Officer of Ministry.
I'm Ananda Atukorala, Director Sri Lankan Airlines.
I'm Jayantha, Director Sri Lankan Airlines.
I'm A.K.D. Arandara, Director Representative of the Treasury.
I'm Lakmal Ratnayaka, Director Sri Lankan Airlines.
Malik Fernando, Director Sri Lankan Airlines.
Dalvin Tirukumar, Company Secretary Sri Lankan Airlines. I'm Devika Abesure, Director General Engineering, Ministry of Port Shipping and Aviation.
I am Himali Vijayaratna, Chief Internal of Ministry.
Mangala Vijaysekara, CEO Sri Lankan Catering.
Yasanta Disanayaka, Chief Financial Officer Sri Lankan Airlines.
Nalaka Sanjeev, Head of Finance Sri Lankan Catering.
Dimutu Tenakon, Head of Sales and Distribution, Sri Lankan Airlines.
Chaminda Pereira, General Manager Cargo, Sri Lankan Airlines.
Buddhika Manage, Group Head of HR, Sri Lankan Airlines.
Tushari Pereira, Senior Manager, Group Legal Affairs, Sri Lankan Airlines.
Manjuli Hettigama, Manager, Group Assurance and Advisory Services, Sri Lankan Airlines.
Arjuna Kapugiyana, Head of Engineering, Sri Lankan Airlines.
Tilak Sive, Chief Accountant, Minister of Port Shipping and Aviation.
බොහොම ස්තුතියි. අපි විශේෂයෙන් අද ශ්‍රී ලංකා ගුවන් සමාගම කැඳවුවේ ශ්‍රී ලංකා ගුවන් සමාගමේ ඉදිරි අනාගතය පිළිබඳව ගනු ලබන ක්‍රියාමාර්ග මොනවද කියන එක පිළිබඳව අපි සභාපතිතුමාට විශේෂයෙන් දන්වා හිටියා. කෝ කමිටුවේ ඉස්සරහා ප්‍රසන්ටේෂන් එකක් කරන්න කියලා. ඉතින් අපි සතුටු වෙනවා පසුගිය වසර දෙකක කාල සීමාව තුළ මෙහෙයුම් ලාභයක් ශ්‍රී ලංකන් ගුවන් සමාගම ලබාගෙන තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම එහි වර්ධනයකුත් තියෙනවා. නමුත් අවාසනාවකට සමුච්චිත අලාභය ශීඝ්‍රයෙන් වර්ධනය වෙමින් පවතින බිලියන 1.2ක අලාභයක් එකතු වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම රුපියල අවප්‍රමාණ වීමත් එක්ක මේක රුපියල් වටිනාකම ප්‍රමාණිකව වැඩි වෙමින් පවතිනවා. ඒ පිළිබඳවත් කමිටුවේ අවධානය යොමු වෙලා තියෙනවා. නමුත් අපි ගණනය කරලා බැලුවා ඒක පුද්ගල ශ්‍රී ලාංකික ණයවරුම කොච්චරද කියලා. ශ්‍රී ලංකා ගුවන් සමාගමේ සමස්ත අලාභය අපි බෙදුවොත් ජනගහනයෙන් රුපියල් 32000ක් විතර එක්කෙනෙකුට හිමි වෙන ණය කොටස. ඉතින් මේ සමුච්චිත අලාභය තමයි ශ්‍රී ලංකා ගුවන් සමාගමට අපිට දැනෙන විදිහට ඉදිරි ගමන තීන්දුව කිරීම සම්බන්ධයෙන් තියෙන මූලික බාධකය. ඒ වගේම විගණක අධිපතිතුමා දිගින් දිගටම සමහර ගැටලු පිළිබඳව සාකච්ඡා කරලා තියෙනවා. අපි ඒ පිළිබඳව අද සාකච්ඡා කරන්නේ නැහැ. අපි විශේෂයෙන් ශ්‍රී ලංකන් ගුවන් සමාගම කැඳවුවේ තමුන්නාසලා මේ වෙනකොට දන්නවා අලාභ ලබන රාජ්‍ය ව්‍යවසායන් පිළිබඳව රාජ්‍ය තීන්දුවක් අරගෙන තියෙනවා. නමුත් තමුන්නාසලාට අවස්ථාවක් දෙන්න ඕන ගුවන් සමාගම මෙහෙවන පිරිස විදිහට මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඔබගේ අදහස මොකක්ද කියලා ඒ පිළිබඳව අපි තම ඕනෑකමින් ආරාධනා කරනවා මේ ප්‍රසන්ටේෂන් එක කරන්න. සභාපතිතුමා.
Yeah. So Movisudi, Mama. So we will can we get my CEO to start the presentation? Yes. So after that, I mean, we can.
Yes. We'll have a discussion. Certainly, let him do the presentation.
Okay, Chairman, honourable members, ladies and gentlemen. Do you want to go to the first slide, Jayantha? So I think the first point that we just wanted to make on the first slide is that Sri Lanka isn't just an airline, it's an aviation group. The airline itself spans 35 cities from London to Sydney and Tokyo. We're a member of one of the 3 global alliances, we're a member of the One World Alliance. Everything that we do is very highly regulated, and we have to pass international safety audits and follow internationally approved regulations, as well as the local regulations in Sri Lanka. I think the other point that is very important to understand is that we actually do our business primarily in foreign currency. So 80% of our revenues and 80% of our costs are incurred in foreign currency. So the management accounts that we use, we always work in US dollars, though we understand that in Sri Lanka, as a Sri Lankan state-owned enterprise, we have to report in rupees. So just in terms of the scale of the business, the estimated revenues for the airline for the year 23-24 going forward are just over $1 billion. We also have ground handling, which is estimated to generate $60 million in revenues, and catering is another $40 million in revenues. And in addition to that, we get small amounts of revenues from
There's nothing like that. But I think in terms of Hambantota Airport, which we are managing at the moment, I think Airport Aviation wants to take over that. I think we have, because I mean that's a loss-making thing, and not much of activities at the moment. But so they have requested, and so we have been okay to, yeah.
So tell me again, you earn about 1 billion by the airline.
So we'll, Chairman, we'll come to the results for the last year later on in the presentation. Yeah. We're just giving the scale of the organisation at the moment, if that's okay. So if we go to the second slide, at a very high level, I mean, we have more detail on this, but the goals for the last year really were to stabilise the network and fleet. We have a number of aircraft that have been going off lease that we need to replace. We were very focused on revenue growth, improving our productivity and reducing our costs, and just getting back to operational stability outside of COVID. And the goal was then to be more aspirational as we move forward, which is what we're currently looking at over the next year. We're currently looking at the next level strategy. We had meetings on that yesterday. But in terms of recovery, if we look at the next slide, the first thing that we did during COVID was to take out costs. So we saved $80 million in costs in 1 year during 2022. And on an ongoing basis, there's about 50 million of that continues. We're probably the only state-owned organisation where all the employees took a pay cut to help us get through COVID. We've also taken out costs in terms of aircraft leases, other contracts, and general efficiencies. So if we look at the last year, next slide, we tried to compare ourselves with other airlines because there's a lot of perception that perhaps Sri Lankan Airlines is not run as efficiently as it might be. So we've just looked at the annual results of the annual reports of other major groups. If you look at the notes, some of them are the year 2022, some of them are 9 months, some of them are a year. Depends what we could get hold of at the time in terms of the figures. But what it shows is that our operating margin at 10% is about in the middle of major airlines groups, so it's slightly less than the Qantas Group and Singapore Airlines. but it's double IAG, which is British Airways Iberia Group. It's considerably higher than Indigo, and it's about the same as Air New Zealand. And if you look at our EBITDA margin, it's still over 10%, which is not bad in this industry. If you look at the business model, the way that you measure efficiency typically in this airline is on costs. You do everything per ASK, and an ASK basically is an air seat kilometre. And what that means is that if you fly 100 seats for 1,000 kilometres, that's 100,000 seat kilometres. And so all airlines compare their costs per seat kilometre and their revenues per seat kilometre, and that's a rough measure of efficiency. It depends a little bit on the type of airline, but it gives you an indication on how you're doing. So for Sri Lankan Airlines, if you look at our cost per available seat kilometre, and that is excluding fuel, which is something that you can't control, we are nearly 20% lower than most of our major competitors. We're 20% lower than Emirates, Qatar, and other major airlines in the region. If you look at our RASK, that's about 25% higher than it was pre-COVID, and some of that reflects the fact that yields are high generally in the world, but some of it also is a fact that we have upgraded our revenue management practices and been much more focused on getting pricing that is market-based rather than underselling ourselves. And then in terms of the network, when you don't have money to spare, you focus on flying where you can make money, and we've gradually pruned, and we're doing more flying to the places that we make money, and gradually pulling out or reducing flights to those places that are not quite as profitable, or pulling out where we lose money. So if we just look at an industry comparison on the next page. So when we look at unit costs, the top line is unit costs including fuel. Initially we are pre-COVID, and that shows that pre-COVID we were at 5.26, which was lower than Emirates, Singapore, Thai and Turkish. That number went up a little bit during 22-23 because fuel prices were very, very high last year. If we go to the next line, we've taken out fuel, so that's the bit that we as an airline we can control. So there again, pre-COVID, we were lower than the other airlines at 3.55, and last year we reduced our costs further, and we delivered each ASK at 3.31 cents per kilometre. And then if you look at our costs, as befits a place that is not a financial centre, but is more tourism and diaspora, our yields typically are slightly lower than some of the other airlines, but we have made considerable progress. Pre-COVID, we were at 5.11 cents per ASK in terms of our revenues, and that has grown just over 25% to 6.55. The other area where we are sometimes regarded as perhaps being inefficient is in staff costs. So if you look at our staff costs as a share of operating and finance charges, pre-COVID were 15%, which was slightly lower than our competitors. During COVID, we reduced salaries. We did get some benefit from the devaluation of the Sri Lankan rupee, but we also reduced numbers by over 1,000 employees. So at the moment our staff costs are 7 to 8% of our running costs, which is considerably lower than the industry. And if you look at our average number of employees per aircraft in March 2023 at 115, again that compares very favourably with our competitors. So if we look at the financial performance, I don't know, do you want to do the financials, Jayantha?
So you can see we have put a pre-COVID year, during COVID year and last year, and also our forecast for next year. So see that we were losing money even pre-COVID, and during COVID obviously we did lose money. And so the revenues, which were about $872 million, came down during COVID to less than half of that. It has gone back to almost pre-COVID levels. Last year, that is the year ended 31st March 23. And here you can see that we have made an operating profit in US dollar terms of 104 million, that is before interest. And even after interest of 101 million, we have made a marginal profit. Means 3 million, you can say break even or a marginal profit. And similarly, next year again, we are hoping to make a profit before finance charges of 163 million, and then a net profit of 52 million after again very high finance charges of 110 million. We will make a
so I must add, this is probably the first time after Emirates that the airline has made profits. I mean, very marginal profit, but we have made money. That means bottom line. That means after depreciation, interest, after paying interest to the banks, we service all the loans, and also we service the loans. I mean, money outstanding due to CPC. After factoring, they are also charging interest. After factoring all that, we have made a very small profit. That is up to 31st March. And also from rupee terms, we have made a fairly large profit of 44 billion, if I am not mistaken. That's mainly because the rupee has appreciated. Because last year we took a heavy loss because our dollar loans were depreciated. I mean, rupee depreciated. So now we have gained something, right?
No, this year also there's a big exchange loss. But of course the exchange loss was much higher if we look at in February. Because February, March there was a appreciation, we got back some of it.
So do we have a rupee loss?
Rupee loss, yes.
Oh, sorry.
Exchange, because of the exchange loss and high finance cost, rupee is a loss. But as CEO tried to explain, we look at our operations in dollar accounts, and then we have made a profit. Yes, that's what it is. Last year it was 163 billion totally. That included an exchange loss of 145 billion. This year it has come down to 69 billion. That's a 62 or almost 63 billion exchange loss. Finance charges of 35 billion.
Okay, yeah. So, in terms of operational challenges, we realized that we needed to reactivate the fleet and replace aircraft where the leases were expiring towards the end of last year and this year and the start of next year. Board approval was granted, and in March 2022, an RFP was issued to replace the aircraft that were leaving the fleet. However, because of the country situation, the RFP could not be finalized at that time. So we've had to try and sort of manage that, and we've managed to extend a couple of aircraft to sort of keep us more or less at the same level. And then as things settled down, we were able to reissue.
Just one point, I think that time we have asked administration to go back to this agreement and to see whether we would be able to extend that one in that time. Can you remember, Shyam, like what was the decision then after you have taken on that?
Some of the aircrafts, because it's up to them,
right.
The lessors. So, and also it's up to us.
Right.
And also
no, I'm asking our decision, from your part.
Yes,
what was the
from
decision?
our decision, obviously, we wanted to take new aircrafts because these are most of the things are very aged aircrafts.
Right.
Right. But provided that they will support us. So what happened was also, as you probably know, that our original tender got delayed because Hope also wanted to delay that at that time. So then we refloated recently. So now the situation is, there's so much of demand. The aircraft are in demand because the industry has picked up heavily. So obviously, we would, when we pick up...
I wanted to know what is the policy decision that you have taken here.
Yes, so we are taking, but at the same time, some of these, we have asked for extension because these are going out. Right, and by the time that we get our new fleet, we are looking at about 5 aircrafts of narrow body and about 3 5.
Now you have 24 fleet, no? Like how many now?
We have about...
So we have 23, although actually the 24th aircraft that was going to go back, we're looking to see if we can extend that for 6 months.
Right. Okay, go ahead.
So the one thing that's changed in the last 12 months is that with the decision to privatize or divest the airline, we were requested by the ministry just to replace aircraft. So we're replacing aircraft to get back to the pre-COPE numbers of 27, although the airline's longer-term plan was to actually grow to 35 by the end of 2025. But at the moment, the decision is to just get back to where we were pre-COVID. We do have challenges that are well documented on engines. These basically come into two categories. The first issues we had was on the 330, the wide-body fleet, and this was an issue with Rolls-Royce. And during COVID times, we got behind on our payments with Rolls-Royce, and they decided that they wanted to implement full penalties and interest rates at 18%. And it took quite a long time before we could come to an agreement. Until we came to an agreement, they wouldn't replace engines very easily. We have now come to an agreement with Rolls-Royce, and engines are being replaced and inducted, and that program is going ahead. And the 330 fleet, the final 330 that needs engines, will be back in the air within about 2 weeks. At the moment, we're flying 11 out, or we've got 10 out of 11 because one is going through a C check, but only one aircraft is on the ground through lack of engines, and that will be corrected in the next 2 weeks. That's the 330s. The more challenging issue that we have is with the 320 NEOs, of which we have 6. And this is a global issue. This is not just a Sri Lankan issue. There are 60 NEOs on the ground in India. Air New Zealand just announced in the last 3 or 4 days that they've had another 2 aircraft that have had to be grounded due to engine difficulties. Hawaiian announced in the last 2 days that they've got 5 on the ground for the same reason. And this is a global issue. So these new technology engines, the LEAP engines, were designed to generate about 15% fuel savings. But the technology required many parts of the engine to operate at much higher pressures. And the reality is that the engines have not been anywhere nearly as reliable as anybody expected. And then what happened was that during COVID, where engines failed and came off the wing, most airlines naturally said, well, let's not fix the engine now because we don't have our fleet in the air and it doesn't make sense for us to spend money now that we're not earning. We'll wait. So what that means is that everybody is trying to get engines back at the same time. Because more engines have failed than expected, and because the engine manufacturers are restricted in the number of people that they've got, there is just not enough capacity in the world to overhaul those engines. And the problem is that those people with 30 or 40 aircraft of the new type of the NEOs, they get priority over people who are a bit smaller. So this has been a challenge. But the reality is we're getting 1 engine back from CFM. They've given us a free engine, which will be back on an aircraft, actually probably back yesterday. So that brings us back 1 aircraft. And we're now working, and we're now gradually getting slots for the remaining NEO aircraft. So as we get towards the end of the year, we should get all of those back flying again. But that is a challenge, has been a challenge, and it's a global challenge. It's not a Sri Lankan issue particularly. So I think we've covered the aircraft replacement plan. Do you want to talk about debt restructuring?
Yes. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, like from the chairman, like now suppose the government of Sri Lanka is dealing with this issue, the company and the whole issue of having airline to the government. So now are you having some cross checks and some discussion between the government policy decision and your company decisions as well?
See,
I just want to know,
yes,
like, whether
yes,
you are in the page, like, you know.
Yeah, of course, right. Because there's a new SOE restructuring unit.
Right.
It's been appointed for the privatization.
Right.
So, I mean, end of the day, the airline is owned by the treasury.
No, I don't want to, like, I just want to know, now this IMF and all these documentations are mentioning about this whole thing. Now, but it seems you are making a kind of profitable line in here.
So that is the reason why we asked them to come and do a presentation. Let them finish the presentation and then you can raise any questions. So please go ahead with the debt restructuring.
No, it is over, no?
So if you look at our debt position, I mean, we owe the two state banks 359 million. We have international.
Can you kindly speak to the mic?
We own 350 million to the 59 million to the state banks. We have an international bond of US dollars millions. And 175 million we have international bond. Then during COVID and during last year's problems, we fell back to paying the lessors, the aircraft lessors. But we are paying them now, but we are not paying them the arrears, but they are working with us to resolve this situation. Then CPC, we have over 300 million. Again, I need to mention that since the fourth quarter of 21, we have been paying CPC for all the fuel. These are arising from old outstanding, which they charge interest on. That interest is also included here. So on the international bond, interest payments were deferred last year in consultation with the Ministry of Finance in line with the national debt restructuring policies. And the interest cost, even next year, we expect it to be even higher. Out of it, 92 million will be about 110 million. The interest rates also went up for dollars and rupees both during the last year. Internationally also dollar interest rates went up, US dollar rates. So, and the cabinet has taken a decision here to restructure the debt, and they are appointing a separate advisor from the Ministry of Finance or the restructuring unit to advise them on the restructuring of the debt. So we need to see what the outcome of that is. They had a meeting with them today also. They said that by early May that they will complete.
Have you presented anything of your own in terms of debt restructuring?
No. See, I mean, we have presented from the board our plan, right? You know
what is it?
No, we were not sure about the privatization. So by then there were no discussion about the privatization. So our plan was to see whether, right, I mean, whether we can sell part of, because we own the catering services. Then we have the ground handling, which is a very profitable. So what we said was carve out the ground handling, maybe that 49% of ground handling can be sold. So our idea was at that time, you know, to recover some of the money by maybe partly selling catering, maybe we will be able to collect about $600 million, $600 million, which can go to repay the debts of the banks and the CPC. But we never knew about the plans of the privatization fully. Now I think with the IMF and all that, so government has a solid plan in terms of privatizing. So I think it may be on the long run, what we feel is, right, I think the board also feel, privatization would help as long as that we find the right partner. Because also that might give some sustainability to the airline. Because as you know, when the airline is under the government, right, so there are a lot of changes, political changes. Every time the government changes, most of the time the boards change, the chairman change. I think it should be run like a proper corporate entity and should be empowered. The people should be empowered to take decisions and run. So I think in that sense, if the country can find the right partner, I think that might on the long run, from a sustainability perspective, and also in terms of from the employees' perspective, I think that might do very well. Are we? No. We have reduced. That's what I said. We have reduced, as the CEO explained, we have reduced about 1,000 employees. So we feel we are now within, and also we are short of people. Now we all sometimes see. It's not working, no? And because we have issues, I think at the ground handling level, at the airport. But I think everybody, all the airports have had these issues after coming back from COVID, because people have left and now they are rehiring. So we are also going through that process. Then when you are within the government, there are restrictions in terms of recruitments. So those have obviously impacted our service levels.
Is there a norm in the industry where there is a certain amount of employees per aircraft?
There are norms, but if you look at it, that's why we have to take the airline separately. Because we are the airline group, we have the ground handling as well. So if you take the ground handling out, and if you check the airline wise, I think we are within we have brought it to normal standard levels.
Chairman, just a quick question. You mentioned something about privatization. I mean, you're absolutely right. Privatization is not something wrong as long as the country benefits out
That's
of it.
right.
In the past, privatization has been done to benefit,
Absolutely.
some individuals. So, is there with the SOE restructuring as well? Is there any discussions that you're aware of that maybe?
No.
Is there
So
anything?
it's progressing. Can I tell you what's happening right now? So obviously, right, I think they have made announcements in terms of there are 4 to 5 government institutes, including Insurance Corporation, Lanka Hospital, which is under Insurance Corporation.
Chairman, are you specifically aware what is the government intention with the Sri Lankan Airlines?
Of course, we are in discussions with the SOE restructuring unit, and also that we are time to time we meet the Honorable Minister who is in charge of the subject, and also we get opportunities to meet His Excellency as well. Right, so we are aware what the government is looking at. So we don't know how the process is going to eventually happen. But I think at this moment the way
are you part of it or?
Yeah, we are part of it. Now, if you part of it mean that we now correct. Now we have to appoint a board committee, right? Which I think tomorrow we have a board meeting that we will appoint a board committee who would be involved in this discussion. Then, obviously from a restructuring perspective and to support them with the information and everything, there is another committee headed by the CEO and all our top management. So all that is ongoing, and also we feel there's a good SOE committee, good respectable names, and I feel that hopefully that they will get to do a good transparent job. I mean, if that happens, I think things at this moment I can say that things are going in a smooth manner, but I can't tell you about how it's going to be in the future. But as long as
we need to know that till that happens, that the Sri Lankan government would take over Sri Lankan Airlines. Till then, how are we going to manage?
Yeah, so it has been a struggle, right? Although the company has made operational profits, right? We owe about almost $123 million to the lessors. I think that's our biggest headache. But even from the lessors' perspective, they are happy if there is a privatization happening. Now that's their hope, because they can deal with whoever the incoming investor, and they probably will be able to recover the money. But also, why we have been able to withheld and to manage all this debt, because they have been very confident with the current management, how we have managed, right? And they have seen that we have been, although that we have gone through very difficult period, even this year, as you know, there were protests and there were a lot of issues, and there were no fuel available, right? We had to fly to India to get fuel. So there are lots of issues for there. But hopefully now the country is back, in peace, and things are happening, and IMF money has come, so there's a lot of positivity, right? We hope that things will continue. If it continues, obviously the airline also will benefit.
Now you say that you have now broken the red tape and you are having a certain kind of operation profit.
We are having a fair amount of operational profits, but we need to repay our debt.
I know, but there are very recent 2 incidents where one particular airline had to delay 30 hours and one had to reroute back to Katunayaka because of another failure. Now in such a situation, what are the decisions you have taken now?
So these are, we would say these are normal for any airline. I understand, right? This shouldn't happen. We must try to avoid this.
You are trying to say that this is a normal thing?
No, because of this flight, particularly you are talking about the Melbourne flight.
Yeah.
Right? So if we had to send a separate aircraft, this would have anyway taken about another 20-24 hours. Right? So the decision what we took was, right, after consulting our engineering team, that we will get it repaired and things would be okay. So we were monitoring. But at the same time that we have looked after all our passengers, that we have provided them lodging, hotels, that we have the meals and compensated them. So I think we have done our best, right? Obviously there was discomfort for the people. There's no question about it. But from our airline's perspective, we did our best to, keep keep them, comfort them,
Now,
But the
Chairman,
technical problems, it happens with anybody, right? But, also having said that, I mean, as you know, that we have limited aircrafts.
We have a very reputed history.
Yes.
Before. Because if I go through the history of the Sri Lankan Air, I think they had a very good history, very good reputation. So these are, I think, I know the difficulties you are facing, but you must avoid it somehow, not to repeat, not to happen it again. I know, that I know.
Now, Mr. Chairman, there's another very important issue, as Honorable Chair mentioned here. Now, the government of Sri Lanka is having completely different thinking about this particular business. And now you need to even renew some of the lease with the aircrafts. Now your fleet should be, now as you said, now that thing is also going ahead. So now don't you need to get a kind of substantive position of the state in order to go ahead with some of these things? Like, this is not my issue, but I'm asking in your issue, like I think you have to have kind of solid idea that what to do with these things. Now if not, you can't commit for this new...
Yeah, so that is why, as the CEO said, that our original plan was to, increase to our fleet to about 35 aircraft. So which we have not done because of this privatization plan. So I think it's better that we don't plan, right, for the next 3 to 4 years unless that we have some idea about where the privatization is heading. Because we don't know if there's a new investor, what their plan is going to be. So I think it makes sense. So what we are just now trying to do is replace our existing one, the planes which are going out, so that at least we can service our current routes. So we are not...
That's our biggest concern, Chairman. Now we don't know when the privatization will take place, so any other management option would come. But till then, you have to run the airline.
Yes.
You have to run the Sri Lankan catering. You have to run the ground handling. So we are quite interested in knowing how well you are ready to take the challenge. I mean, it is challenging.
Yes. So, Honorable Chairman, now in this presentation that you can see that we have given a forecast for next year, which is based on our existing fleet and also replacements.
Yeah.
So we are not factored any expansion. So, but even then, if we are somewhat good numbers what you're talking about, we will be positive hopefully, right? So I think let's try and see how the privatization process goes, because...
No, it will be supportive of privatization when the airline is running at least with the marginal profit.
Yes, it is happening now, right? But the fact is, right, I mean, at this moment, obviously, right, I mean, when there is a transition happening, I don't think it is right for us to go and expand, and because we may not be in a position to, talk about a 4 to 5 year, plan. So I think right now what we are looking at is how we are going to be this year, and probably, right, I mean, we will wait and see how the progress is going to be in terms of the privatization. And then we will have to think about how the next year what our plans are going to be. So I think this we need to be in consultation with our shareholders and the, treasury and the government and everybody. And I mean, as we said, that we are in touch with them, right? I mean, obviously, we discuss about, what's going on with the privatization.
සමතුමා දැන් මේ ඔබතුමා පැහැදිලි කරපු ආකාරයට මේ ඔපරේෂනල් ප්‍රොෆිට් එක අරන් තියෙනකොට මේ පාඩු ලබන්නේ ලීසින් වාරික වලට ගෙවන්න වෙච්ච එකන්නේ වැඩි ප්‍රමාණයක් ණය ගෙවන්න ගිය එකන්නේ
ඉන්ට්‍රෙස්ට් කොස්ට් එක
ඉන්ට්‍රෙස්ට් එක දෙකම එකතු වෙලා. එතකොට දැන් ආණ්ඩුව තීරණයක් ස්ථිරව අරගෙන නැත්නම් මේක ප්‍රයිවටයිස් කරනවද මොකක්ද කියලා එතකම් මේ ඔපරේෂන් එක ගෙනියන්න ඕන. හැබැයි දැන් තියෙන තත්ත්වය අනුව ප්‍රොෆිටබල් ෆෝකාස්ට් එකකට ගෙනියන්න පුළුවන්ද මේ තියෙන තත්ත්වයත් එක්ක මේ තියෙන එයාක්‍රාෆ්ට් එක මේ දැන් මීට පෙර වතාවකදී ඔබතුමා රෝඩ් මැප් එකක් පෙන්නුවා අපිට මේ එයාලයින් එක ප්‍රොෆිට් කරන්නේ කොහොමද කියලා ඉවරලා. දැන් ඒක නිශ්චිතව එහෙම එකකට යන්න පුළුවන්ද නැත්නම් මේ අන්ෂුවර් විදියට යන්න වෙලා තියෙන්නේ මේ මොකද්ද ඒක සිටුේෂන්.
So we can't execute that plan because now this is a different thing. Earlier one that we showed you all, right, 3-year plan based on that at that time we were not very sure about what the government's plan. right? So now the government has completely decided on the privatization. So we will have to, I mean, obviously, right, I mean, our plans have changed.
But even if the government decided to privatize, so if we want to get the proper price, we have to manage in the quality way, no?
So we are managing it. I think that at the moment, right, that's what I say, the next year also it will be profitable, hopefully. So I think that's good, right? So, but...
No, that positive outlook make a big difference in the eyes of investor.
Now, Mr. Chairman, here in last time 2022 April 25th, the financial document shows that you had US dollars 889 million
debt.
So it was spread as according to the Auditor General's reports 409 million of main state banks. But here it seems there are some changes, like it means that you have already paid of some of these. What?
You have been serving, right?
We have been only paying the interest to the banks. Is this rupees? I'm not sure. Maybe
no, it is dollars.
Dollars.
This is the
So our debt has not expanded with the banks. So because the banks have not given us any new facilities, right? Debt may have.
It has reduced also.
It has reduced, maybe.
Overdraft facility keeps fluctuating, so that reduces, and also there was a $30 million loan that they gave during COVID, which the Bank of Sri Lanka recovered.
So it may be a very small fluctuation, but there are no new facilities being given.
But your capital has reduced, but interest has increased.
Capital will reduce because, I mean, when you are making losses, it will go out from your capital, no?
The capital, sir.
So that is why we have parked our liabilities. More liabilities are there with the lessors. So what we are doing is we are managing the lessors. So that we need to we have to sort out at some point.
Clarification that you all said that you all have reduced the employees, but in 2021 the salaries and the other expenses for the employees was 3,917 million, but 22 it has increased up to 4,330 million. If any particular reason?
Can somebody?
This is in rupees.
Rupees, yeah. Like when the employees are reduced, the cost has increased. Any particular reason?
No, we pay in dollars to cabin crew and pilots. So obviously that with dollars, right, rupee wise, there must have been a substantial jump, right? But at the same time, we also have increased salaries of other employees in rupee terms because they have to live, right, in reasonable ways. And we also have to retain good people, otherwise how can you run an airline?
Mr. Chairman, if you look at the information provided, from an operations point of view, there certainly has been some efficiencies that have been created because on the numbers given to us in terms of employees per aircraft, cost per aircraft and so forth. And then it's, I think the board has been doing its best because they have tried to handle the operational side of it, which is what they can actually handle.
Yeah, no, that's what I said from the beginning, that we should congratulate the management team that at least they have taken very serious steps to take the airline to at least a privatization level.
Yeah, I think the issue is beyond running the airline, and that's where the board and the management come in. It's a whole bigger issue, which is not a present issue. This issue has been there for decades, is the structural issue and the capitalization issue. And we are trying to get boards from time to time, and over the years they have been coming here and they've been struggling because the government hasn't capitalized the company and the government is expecting to do wonders out of it. So what I would say is the indications that state-owned enterprises are going to be handled, privatized, recapitalized, closed down, whatever, different enterprises in different ways. The one thing I would say here is if you obviously attract a person to take the airline, then there is no issue about it. And the question is, can you find somebody in the current circumstances and all to take the airline? Because ultimately it's a question about, can this airline be in the longer run profitable? Will it look attractive to an investor? And you have to deal with the issue of a negative net worth and the debt in actually doing the valuation. That's going to measure in a big way. So if you, when you are tackling that problem, if they come to the conclusion that it can't be done, then the logical conclusion is you don't proceed with the airline. But if you can do it, that's excellent. The other conclusion is it's not in the board's hands, it's in the hands of the shareholders and the government. If you take a political decision that anyway you want to run the airline, if you take a political decision, then what we are concerned as Parliament is that we don't want to be funding the losses continuously, right? And therefore we need to find a way around it. So I would say when the government is looking at it, and this is
it's
question,
a commercial business.
Yeah, more than for the board, for the government is looking at it, and on state-owned enterprises, right? If you keep the airline because of the lack of capital and government's inability to fund it if somebody else is not going to, and then if you separate the profitable subsidiaries out of it, right, catering, ground handling, engineering, whatever they might be, right, so you are getting rid of those, and there's an economic case because you can improve the performance of those also. But I'm saying is, don't look at it independently till you deal with the airline. You must deal with the airline, and then you might decide to deal with them independently. That's one possibility. Or if you are really stuck with the airline, right, because ultimately the airline is what's giving basically the taxpayer a huge issue over the long run. And therefore, the government, right, will have to look at it more collectively, because I'm sure there will be buyers for all the profitable businesses, and this one is going to be the real issue. And therefore the government, right, we should convey to government that they should look at it, deal with the airline and deal with the rest. If you don't deal with the airline, that doesn't mean that there can be an understanding that we have a structure for the airline and therefore you deal with the rest. But don't look at it separately, I'm saying, look at it.
Now, you will make sure that the airline will run smoothly and with the operational profit till we will find the right investor, either to privatize or to have a public-private partnership. I don't know what the model would be.
We are hoping to. As long as there's peace in the country, no protests and issues. So then I think that we should be able to. I mean, as it is, we believe, right, we can do that.
සභාපතිතුමා මේ මට පොඩි කාරණා දෙකක් කතා කරන්න තියෙනවා. එකක් තමයි අපි අගය කරනවා, ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා. පසුගිය වසර තුනේදී ඔබතුමාලා ඉතාමත්ම ධෛර්යවන්ත, දැන් සභාපතිතුමාගේ ලොකු දැනුත් ධෛර්යයක් තියෙනවා මේක කරගෙන යන්න පුළුවන් කියලා ලොකු කොන්ෆිඩන්ස් එකක්. ඒක නා අපි ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම හොඳ ප්‍රොෆෙෂනල් ඉහළ වෘත්තීය මට්ටමේ පිරිසක් මේ වෙලාවේ එයාලයින් එක රන් කරනවා. හැබැයි අපි කනගාටු වෙනවා, මොකද පහුගිය වසර ගානක් අතීතයට ගියාට පස්සේ මෙයා ලයින් එකට මේ අවාසනාවන්ත තත්ත්වය උදා වුණේ මොකද කියලා ඉතින් අපිම දන්නවා. මොකද කිසිම සුදුසුකමක් නැති සභාපතිවරුන්ගේ ඉඳන් අධ්‍යක්ෂවරු පත් කරලා තමයි මේ අවාසනාවන්ත තත්ත්වය උදා වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ ගැන අපි වෙනම කතා කරනවා. මම අහන්න කැමති පසුගිය මුදල් කමිටුවේදී ගරු සභාපතිතුමා ඔබතුමාලා ඉදිරිපත් කරා ප්‍රොපෝසල් එකක් ප්‍රොෆෙසර් හර්ෂ ඩි සිල්වාගේ කමිටුවට ඇවිල්ලා. ඒකට ඒකෙදී අපි 3 months දුන්නා ඔබතුමාලට අර ප්‍රොපෝසල් එක.
ඒක අපි ඒ කාලේදී මුකුත් කරුවේ නැහැ නේ අපි.
ඒක තමයි. එතනත් මේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් ඇති කරානේ, මේ අනවශ්‍ය ප්‍රශ්නයක්. එතකොට එහෙම ඒක වුණා නම් අද මේ එයාක්‍රාෆ්ට් ග්‍රවුන්ඩ් කරන එකට ප්‍රශ්නෙට උත්තරයක් එනවද? අපිට දැනගන්න කැමතියි. ඒක මොකද ඒක
ඇත්තට මේ වෙලාවේ ඒක අපිට කරන්න දුන්නා නම් අද ඇත්තටම අපි එයාක්‍රාෆ්ට්ස් මිට වැඩිය අඩු ගානකට ගන්නත් තිබුණා. එයාලයින් එක මිට වැඩිය හොඳට කරන්නත් තිබුණා. අපිට එතකොට මේ වෙලාවේ එයාක්‍රාෆ්ට්ස් තියෙනවා. දැන් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ මේක ඩිලේ කරපින්ද දැන් ඩිමාන්ඩ් එක වැඩි. අපි most probably ඊට වැඩිය හුඟක් ගානක් ගෙවනවා.
ඉතින් ඒක එපා කිව්ව ජනාධිපතිතුමානේ.
ඉතින් මම දන්නේ නැහැ ඒක.
නෑ ඒක එපා කිව්වේ ඒ වෙලාවේ මුදල් කමිටුවේදී හර්ෂ සිල්වා මැතිතුමා ගන්න යනකොට නැවැත්තුවා.
කමිටි එකෙන් රෙකමන්ඩ් කරුවේ ඒකේ වෙලාවේ.
කෝපායකෙන් රෙකමන්ඩ් කළා. ඊට පස්සේ මුදල් කමිටුවට ගෙනල්ලා මොකද කොහේ හරි ට්විටර් එක මොකාරි මාකරි ඔය තියනවා කියලා විස්තරයක් මේ යාක්‍රාෆ්ට් 40 ගානක් ගන්නවා කියලා නෑ ඒක අපි කතා කරන මාතෘකාවක්. දැන් මේ එතකොට ලොකු බ්ලන්ඩ් එකක් මේ ලොකු පිස්සුවක් ඇති කරලා ඒ වෙලාවේ යුක්‍රේන් වෝ එකත් එක්ක මට මතකයි සභාපතිතුමා ප්‍රසන්ට් කරනවා ඔය යාබාසස් 320 330 නියෝ එහෙම ග්‍රවුන්ඩ් කරලා තියෙන හොඳ ප්‍රයිස් එකකට ගන්න පුළුවන් කියලා ස්ටැටිස්ටික් ඩේටා එක්ක ප්‍රසන්ටේෂන් එකක් කරා. එතකොට ඒ වෙලාවේ ඒවා ගත්තා නම් අද අපිට මේ ඊයේ පෙරේද අපි දැක්ක ඩුබායි ඉඳලා ඩුබායි ගිය එයාක්‍රාෆ්ට් එකක් ආපහු වෙලා ග්‍රවුන්ඩ් කරනවා. ඒතර මේ ප්‍රශ්න විසඳුමක් එනවද එහෙම වුණා නම් කියන එක ගැන අපිට
මීට වැඩි හොඳ තත්ත්වයක තියෙනවා. තේන්න තිබුණා. ඉඩකමක් තිබුණා. Financially it would have been a much better position.
ලේකම්තුමා දැන් ඔබතුමාලගේ අමාත්‍යාංශයේ මට්ටමින් ශ්‍රී ලංකන් ගුවන් සමාගමත් ඒ අනුබද්ධ ආයතන දෙකත් පිළිබඳව ඉදිරියේදී ගන්න ක්‍රියාමාර්ග මොන වගේවද? එහෙම සාකච්ඡාවක් සිදුවීම පවතිනවා.
සාකච්ඡා කරටාවක් වුණා ගරු සභාපතිතුමනි අපේ ශ්‍රී ලංකන් එයාලයින් එකත් එක්ක සභාපතිතුමා සහ නිලධාරීන් එක්කත් ඒ වගේම SOE restructuring unit එකත් එක්කත් අපි කතා බහ කළා. අපි අමාත්‍ය මණ්ඩලයට නිර්දේශ කළේ කර අපේ ශ්‍රී ලංකන් සභාපතිතුමා ඉස්සෙල්ලා සඳහන් කළා වගේ අපි අමාත්‍යාංශය හැටියට යෝජනා කළා රීස්ට්‍රක්චර් කරන්න අපේ අමාත්‍යාංශය යටතේ ground handling වෙනමත් catering වෙනමත් ශ්‍රී ලංකන් එයාලයින් වෙනමත් අවස්ථා තුනකදී. නමුත් අමාත්‍ය මණ්ඩලය තීරණය කළේ නෑ මේක රීස්ට්‍රක්චරින් යුනිට් එකෙන් කළ යුතුයි කියලා. ඒ අනුව තමයි ඒක රීස්ට්‍රක්චරින් යුනිට් එකට රිෆර් කළේ. ඒ අනුව රීස්ට්‍රක්චරින් යුනිට් එක ඒක බාර අරගෙන අපිත් එක්කත් අමාත්‍යාංශය එක්කත් සාකච්ඡා කළා. ශ්‍රී ලංකන් එයාලයින් එකත් එක්ක සාකච්ඡා කළා. ඒ සාකච්ඡා කළා ඒගොල්ලෝ දැනට කටයුතු කරමින් යනවා මොන ආකාරයකටද මේක කරන්නට ඕන කියන කාරණේ සම්බන්ධයෙන්. දැනට ඒගොල්ලෝ මම හිතනවා ලසාට් කියන ආයතන සමගත් සාකච්ඡා කරලා තිබෙනවා. ඒ වගේම ස්ටේට් ඕන් එන්ටර්ප්‍රයිස් යුනිට් එකේ අදහස වෙන්නේ ට්‍රාන්සැක්ෂන් ඇඩ්වයිසර් කෙනෙක් අරගෙන මේක එකවර ඒ කියන්නේ ශ්‍රී ලංකන් එයාලයින් ග්‍රවුන්ඩ් හැන්ඩලින් කේටරින් කියන ඔක්කොම එකවර ආයෝජකයෙකුට ලබා දුන්නොත් හොඳයි කියන අදහස.
ඒ කියන්නේ මේ තුනම
දුන්නොත් හොඳයි කියන අදහස තිබෙන්නේ. නමුත් ඒක තාම අවසාන තීරණයකට ඇවිල්ලා නැහැ. නමුත් ස්ටේට් ඕන් එන්ටර්ප්‍රයිස් රීස්ට්‍රක්චරින් යුනිට් එක මේ පිළිබඳව ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ විශේෂඥ දැනුමක් පාවිච්චි කරමින් ඒගොල්ලෝ කටයුතු කරගෙන යනවා.
ලේකම්තුමා ඔබතුමාගේ දැනුම අනුව කියනකොට දැන් මේකේ මේ දැන් ඔපරේෂනල් ප්‍රොෆිට් එකක් තියෙනවා ශ්‍රී ලංකන් එයාලයින් එකේ. එතකොට ග්‍රවුන්ඩ් හැන්ඩලින් උයි කේටරින් උයි ලාභයි. හරිද? ප්‍රශ්න තියෙන්නේ මේ අධික ණයබරනේ. හරිද? එතකොට දැන් කවුරු හරි ඉතින් මේ එහෙම ණය ටික කවුද වක්කීම් බාරගන්නේ එතකොට?
ඒ ප්‍රශ්නේ අපි අමාත්‍ය මණ්ඩලයට පැහැදිලිවම කියලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම අපි සාකච්ඡා කරන හැම අවස්ථාවකදීම කිව්වා මේ මහා භාණ්ඩාගාරයට මේ මුදල් බාර ගන්නට හැකියාවක් නැහැ. ඒ නිසා වඩාත්ම හොඳ ක්‍රමය වෙන්නේ කේටරින් එක සහ ග්‍රවුන්ඩ් හැන්ඩලින් දීලා මේ ණයබර යම් ප්‍රමාණයකින් අඩු කරගන්න එක කියලා. නමුත් ඉතින් විවිධ අදහස් තිබෙනවා. මාධ්‍යනොත් විවිධ පුද්ගලික විවිධ කරුණු කාරණා කතා කරනවා. ඒ නිසා මේක ඉතින් එක එක්කිනා දරන මතිමතාන්තර අනුව තමයි
නෑ මම ඔබතුමාගෙන් ඇහුවේ
මගේ දැනුම අනුව නම් මම පැහැදිලිවම කියලා තිබෙනවා මේක ශ්‍රී ලංකා කේටරින් සහ ග්‍රවුන්ඩ් හැන්ඩලින් වෙනමත් ඒ වගේම ශ්‍රී ලංකන් එයාලයින් වෙනමත් කියලා යුතුයි කියලා දැනුත් මම කියන්නේ ඒ කාර්යයමයි. ඒ විදිහට කරොත් තමයි මේක වඩාත්ම නිවැරදි වෙන්න රට පැත්තෙන්.
ලේකම්තුමා දැන් මාධ්‍යයට ඕන වෙලාවට එක එක කියන්න පුළුවන් මාධ්‍යකින් විතර වැඩ කරන්න ගිහිල්ලා රටක් පාලනය කරන්න බෑනේ.
හරි මන්ත්‍රීතුමා මම අදහස් කරේ මාධ්‍යයට කියන විදිහට කරනවා නෙමෙයි. අපේ අදහස අපි පැහැදිලිවම කියලා තියෙනවා. අමාත්‍ය මණ්ඩලයට ඒකට මාධ්‍ය සම්බන්ධයක් නැහැ. නමුත් මේ මාධ්‍ය මම ඉස්සෙල්ලා සඳහන් කළේ මාධ්‍යයේ තියෙන විවේචනات මම හිතනවා අනිකුත් පාර්ශ්වයන් සැලකිල්ලට ගනී කියලා එකයි.
සභාපතිතුමා ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන්
නෑ ඒක තමයි මම දැන් පැහැදිලිවම කිව්වේ මේ ශ්‍රී ලංකන් එයාලයින් එකේ තිබෙන ණය බර කවුරු හරි බාරගත යුතුයිනේ. මන්ත්‍රීතුමා කවුද බාරගන්නේ? මහා භාණ්ඩාගාරයට බාර ගන්න පුළුවන් හැකියාවක් නැති බවයි මගේ විශ්වාසය.
අපේ ලේකම්තුමා දැන් මං ආන්නේ රීස්ට්‍රක්චරින් යුනිට් එක ඔය ණය බර පිළිබඳ ඒගොල්ලෝ මොකද්ද අදහස දැන්?
දැන් මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් රීස්ට්‍රක්චරින් යුනිට් එකේ එතන හෙඩ් ප්‍රධානියත් සමගත් අපි කතා කළා. ඉතින් එතුමාගේ අදහසක් තියෙන්නේ මේක එකතු කරලා සමස්තයක් හැටියට කිව්වත් වඩා හොඳ මුදලකට මේක දී ගන්න පුළුවන් කියන එක.
යුනිට් එකේ ප්‍රධානියා ගෙන්නලා
නෑ ඒක තමයි නෑ මං අහන්නේ නෑ ඊළඟ එක කරු සභාපතිතුමනි මේ දැන් ඔබතුමාගේ දැන් අපේ එයාලයින් එකේ රිප්‍රසන්ටේටිව් කෙනෙක් ඉන්නවද ඒ යුනිට් එකේ?
නෑ නෑ අපි ඒක රීස්ට්‍රක්චරින් යුනිට් එක වෙනම හදලා තියෙන්නේ ඕවරෝල් නේ. ඒ කියන්නේ ශ්‍රී ලංකන් ප්‍රයිවටයිස් ගන්න විතරක් නෙවෙයි අයිඩෙන්ටිෆයි කරපුවා
නෑ ඒක හරිය නෑ මං අහන්නේ දැන් මේක ටිකක් ලොකුම බර්ඩන් එකක් තියෙන ආයතන විතර මෙතනින් කාවරි එතන පූර්ණ කාලේ
නෑ ඒගොල්ලෝ මං හිතන්නේ අපිත් එක්ක ඩිස්කස් කරයි මේක ඉස්සරහට
එහෙමයි මං හිතන්නේ ඔබතුමාලත් එක්ක දීර්ඝ සාකච්ඡාවක නිරත වෙයි. ඒක නිකන් මේ ආවට ගියට කරන්න බෑ.
ඕනේ බෝඩ් එකක් ත්‍රූනේ. ඔව්. බෝඩ්. So from what I know. Right?
දැන් මේ සභාවතුමා මට තව පොඩි කාරණා දැන් අපිට මේ කෙටි කාලේ දැන් මේක කෙරෙන දවස කවදාද කියලා අපි හිතමු කාලයක් ඇයිනේ. දැන් අපි සභාවතුමා අපි අහන්නේ දැන් මේ අපේ එයාක්‍රාෆ්ට් වලට දැන් මේ තියෙන ඉමීඩියට්ලි දැන් තියෙන මේ ප්‍රශ්නෙට මොකද්ද තියෙන විසඳුම?
ඒක කරගෙන යනෝනේ.
සභාවතුමා වැදගත් මේ
ඊළඟ මාස 4-5 ඇතුළත අපිට එයාක්‍රාෆ්ට්ස් 10ක් අපි ගන්න තමයි ඒක රිප්ලේස්මන්ට් එක කරනවා.
ඒ රෝඩ් මැප් එක කන්ෆර්ම්.
ඒක නෙගෝෂিয়েට් කරලා දැන් අන්තිම
සභාවතුමා
ලාස්ට් ස්ටේජස් වල තියෙන්නේ.
දැන් වැදගත්ම දේ මේ අපි ප්‍රායෝගික තලයේ බැලුවොත් මේ තියෙන ණය බරත් එක මේක විකුණන එක ලේසි වැඩක් නෙමෙයි. හරිද? එහෙනම් දැන් සභාපතිතුමා ෆෝකාස්ට් එකක් දෙනවා නම් ඔපරේෂනල් ප්‍රොෆිට් එක ඉන්ක්‍රීස් කරලා ඉවර වෙලා මේ ණය බර අඩු කරගන්න. හරිද? එතකොට කවුරු හරි කෙනෙක් මේක හැරිලා බලයිද? මම හිතන්නේ දැන් කෝප් කමිටුව හැටියට මගේ නම් යෝජනාව දැන් මේක ආණ්ඩුව විකුණන දවසකුත් නැහැ. ඔහොම තීරණ ගන්නවා. ඕක වෙන්දේසියේ තියෙනවා. ඊට පස්සේ ණයවල වාක්‍යෙම කවුරුත් ගන්න නැත්නම් මේක ප්‍රොෆෙෂනල් මට්ටමට ඒගොල්ලන්ට කරගෙන ගිහිල්ලා දැන් මේ ෆෝකාස්ට් එක ක්ලෝස්ලි මොනිටර් කරලා මේ ඒ ආයතනය දියුණු කරන්න පුළුවන් ක්‍රමයක් තියෙනවද කියලා බලන්න.
නෑ ඒක තමයි අපි දැන් මේ සභාපතිතුමා ගෙන්නැව්වේ මූලික වශයෙන් ওই කාරණේ දැනගන්නනේ. දැන් මේ ශ්‍රී ලංකන් ගුවන් සමාගම පිළිබඳව ඉදිරියේදී ගනු ලබන තීරණය මොකක් වුණත් අපි හිතමු පබ්ලික් ප්‍රයිවට් පාර්ට්නර්ෂිප් එකක් ප්‍රයිවටයිසේෂන් එකක් we don't know. හැබැයි එතෙක්කල් ගුවන් සමාගම කොයි ආකාරයකටද කළමනාකරණය කරනක එතුමා ඉතාම පැහැදිලිව සඳහන් කළා ලොකු ෆෝකාස්ට් එකක් කරන්න බෑ. හැබැයි අපි year by year මේක මැනේජ් කරනවා. next year they will make a profit.
This year, this current year also that we are expecting dollar wise. So I don't know where the rupee going to be.
Lankan Airline is on the safe hand. ඒ නිසා මං හිතන්නේ ඔබතුමාලා අපි කැඳවුවේ ওই කාරණේ දැනගන්න. අපි රීස්ට්‍රක්චරින් යුනිට් එකත් ඉදිරි අවස්ථාවක ගෙනලා කතා කරනවා. බොහොමත්ම ස්තුතියි පැමිණියාට.
One last question. It's a very simple question. You know, earlier you mentioned that some of the flights will be some of the destinations that you're hoping to reduce, and some of the destinations which are more profitable that you are hoping to increase. Just for my understanding, what sort of destinations are seen as more profitable? Because why I say that is in the last few months, I in fact use Sri Lankan Airlines to go to France, Germany, and London. In a sense, it's almost like a service for a lot of the Sri Lankans who live there to have direct flights. It might be, I don't know if those are the flights that are less profitable. So just for my curiosity, one more thing is just a suggestion. I don't know how practical that is. Switzerland, Colombo. If there's any destination from Switzerland also for direct flights, that might also attract a lot of passengers, because I think the Tamil community appreciates these flights because there's very less hassle of transit. So I'd like to also congratulate you and wish you all the best, because the last time we met at COPE, I think it was a very different. The setting was very different. COPE also, I think we had at COPE. It was very the future of the airlines looked very fragile, but I think this meeting has given us also quite a bit of confidence. So I'd like to congratulate you and wish you all the best. Just a clarification on that, so when I do meet people, I can also explain to them.
Yeah, so as you probably may know that in the last 3 years we have actually expanded. I think about 5 to 7 years back they took a decision and closed some of the European destinations. So we expanded to Moscow, Frankfurt, Paris is one of the places we expanded. But the thing is, now right, our issue with the fleet, right? So we are restricted. So with the current fleet, now as what the CEO explained was, now if you take places like China, now China is reopening. Now we also have a responsibility in terms of, developing, helping the economy, national economy. So tourists has to come, right? That's one of the responsibility of the national airline, as a national airline. So as a private airline, they might not do. But as a private airline, obviously they will only look at the route profitability. So we also 99% should be looking at that way, because we have to survive. And also that, we are not, if you take it for the last 2 to 3 years, we are not taken any money from treasury. We have run by ourselves, out of our money and with the help of the creditors and everybody. So we are not tapped into treasury, not even $1. right? And we have not got any help from the government banks as well. They are not increased because they were also not in a position to help us. So we are not asking, right? We know the situation. So we also have to run this airline as a commercial, commercially viable airline. So some of the routes sometimes we will have to cut short. Now say Paris, if you take it, during the season we fly, but during the off season, sometimes we have to reduce flights. And we combine Paris and Frankfurt. So I mean, given that kind of situation, I'm sorry, I don't think that although we would love to fly to Switzerland to help our people, but we may probably in the near future we may not be able to take that decision.
No, I mean it was not from a business perspective. It was just a very common man suggestion, not exploring.
So that's why I said we would like to.
No, that's why it was just a common, just a suggestion. But anyway, I hope you get a cash infusion and you can expand.
Right. අපි අවසාන වශයෙන් අද තමුන්නාසලා කැඳෙව්වේ මූලික වශයෙන් ශ්‍රී ලංකන් ගුවන් සමාගමේ අනාගතේ තීන්දුව කිරීමට පෙර ගුවන් සමාගම ඒ තාක්කල් කොයි ආකාරයටද වාණිජ ව්‍යාපාරයක් විදිහට පවත්වා ගන්න යන පිළිබඳව කතා කරන්න අපි බොහොමත්ම ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා සභාපතිතුමා අධ්‍යක්ෂකතුමා ලේකම්තුමා ප්‍රධාන විධායකතුමා අනිත් සියලුම දෙනාට මේ අවස්ථාවට සහභාගී වීම සම්මාන.
Thank you very much.
සුබ පැතුම්.
Bye, Mr. Karasabapatitumaa.